this is in the recommended pile in the Patreon. This gun set me back 28 bucks, and it's a copy of an Iwata airbrush that I think goes for right around 700 bucks. A couple of the features, in addition to it being gravity fed, it's also got this little void back here. This is super important to making sure that you don't have to disassemble your gun when you're pulling. So what happens when you're shooting this gun is you've got fluid in here, and the needle is pulling back, and it's allowing the fluid to go out the nozzle set right there. But as you're pulling it back, and you can see it's crusty in there. I don't know if you can see that, but that needle is starting to get crusty. The fluid actually goes back behind the needle here. And this guide back here is loose enough that lacquer will come back through it. That's a lot of the times when your gun locks up, that's where it's locking up at. So if at the end of the day, you get done shooting and you take and you get your Q-tip full of some solvent, either lacquer thinner or retarder, acetone's a little fast for this, but you go back and you come in here with your damp Q-tip and just give it a couple like pullbacks like that, maybe loosen this and then twist your needle, give it a couple more, boom, boom, you should be good to go. So that's a pretty good feature right there. One other thing to say about the airbrush, even doing that, these things are going to lock up from time to time. And basically what I mean by lock up is that needle is going to get jammed in there. If you go and you pull back on this, you'll on the trigger, you'll meet some resistance, and this will be locked. It's really tempting to want to go and pull on that needle. So, like if you pull on it like this, you could get it free. But what you're doing is there's hard lacquer on there that's causing it to lock up. And what you're doing when you do that is you're pulling all of that hard lacquer back through all of your little guide Teflon bushings and stuff, and you're starting to abrade those. So if my airbrush locks up, I simply grab it by the needle with a pair of side cutters and I twist it. And then I fill the cup with solvent and then shoot some solvent through it, and that's usually enough to get the brush working again. One other thing I'd say is this is double action. I wouldn't ever recommend anybody buying a single action brush. They're kind of silly. Single action brush means that basically just as soon as you start pressing on the button, it's starting to squirt. So this being double action, as soon as I press on the button, it's starting to shoot air, and as I pull back on the trigger, it's starting to distribute the juice. So that's double action versus single action. The last feature, and we'll get to this a little bit more here in a second when I start showing you how to use this thing, is this little guy here at the nozzle. So there's a couple things. I've got a regulator on the air hose that goes into this. There's of course a regulator on my compressor, and so I can do a lot of kind of crude adjustments of my airflow. But this guy is very, very fine control, and it's at the nozzle. So there's some interesting things that we can do with that. Oh, also on maintenance, I always blow out with retarder afterwards. Acetone is too fast, and lacquer thinner is okay, but I have the least amount of trouble when I blow out with retarder. So anyway, let's do some squirting here. Everybody see that line I'm generating there? I'm closing off that nozzle set. I'm really getting down there. All right. So that's pretty small. The feature I wanted to talk about is dialing this all the way down. I find it's easiest to come down all the way and then start bringing it back up. And then it starts doing these dots and this stipple pattern right here. It is pretty handy. Oh, one other thing I would say too is if your gun's probably at the end of the life, or maybe you didn't do a very good job cleaning it, sometimes they'll start to act almost like single action, where you won't pull back on the trigger, but then all of a sudden you start getting like shit flowing on your project. What's happening there is something's happened, and the needle has moved back just a little bit. So this needle moves back and forth in here, right? If it's moved back just a little bit, then you've got fluid at the nozzle all the time. So if your gun is spitting like that, see how that did that? Matter of fact, I'll load a little bit more up in there. Like, it's not dripping out of it or anything, but if I was to like hit that guy, it's I'm not pulling back on it. I'm just pressing down, and it's shooting lacquer. Just make sure, pull your needle back and then push it all the way forward. Don't cram it forward, or you'll flare your nozzle set, and then it's back to working. It's not like putting that fluid through there anymore. Always do a little test squirt before you point your airbrush at your project, because it can be pretty tragic.